The 3DS was a fantastic little handheld with a whole host of amazing titles that housed many enjoyable RPGs, but easily one of the system's best titles was Bravely Default and its sort of sequel, Bravely Second. Both of these titles delivered some classic old school RPG action whilst also delivering a brilliant new mechanic in the Brave Default system that made the series stand out. But now as the 3DS has passed its prime, it's time for the series to make the jump to Switch with Bravely Default 2, an all-new direct sequel, so let's see if it was worth the wait. First up, let's just get this out of the way that this is a sequel, though its narrative is separate from the other entries, very much like Square Enix Final Fantasy series. This is just set in a new world with a whole new host of characters, so if you're on the fence about playing it because you haven't played the previous games, there's nothing to worry about, so you can just jump straight in. Right, let's talk about the game's story now, and it follows a young lad called Seth, who is washed ashore after a mysterious shipwreck, and he soon meets up with a small group of people who all share similar interests. The main goal here is one of your party members, a young princess called Gloria, is searching for some special crystals to help rebuild her kingdom and prevent impending doom. Its narrative is decent enough for a JRPG, though it's filled with your typical tropes, but it still remains interesting enough for the game's length, and this is mainly due to the great and charming cast of characters. Each of them has their own backstory, a decent amount of depth, and it's great to see the group bond as the game goes along. You go through the game's wonderfully designed environments, meeting the many inhabitants, taking up side quests and doing a bit of shopping for new items and the like. There's also a cool little mechanic here that lets you earn items whilst you're not playing the game, which is very helpful on your journey. Exploration is your typical standard stuff and it's still a joy. On to the combat now, and this is where the game truly shines. It plays like your typical old school JRPG, but with the added mechanics of the Brave and Default system. So you play the game like your typical RPG and wait your turn to attack. But here you can either Brave and Default, and these two actions can change the way a battle pans out. So you could save an attack for the next round by pressing Default, you can stack them up for up to 3 times and then unleash them in a flurry of attacks with Brave. You can brave up for several times and you can even borrow attacks from future turns, but you have to forgo those attacks for the next few rounds. There's an amazing amount of risk versus reward with the Brave system, and even after all these years it's still a fantastic and strategic combat system that gets even more in depth when you add in the job system. The job system is back here with a whole host of new jobs for your characters to choose from. You gain access to the jobs relatively early on in the game and you gain new ones quite often throughout the adventure. Your character can have 2 different jobs. You can have a main job which can be leveled up to gain new abilities, moves and the like, but you can also have a secondary job which gives you the basics of that class, like healing if you choose to be a white mage as a secondary class. It's a great ability to let you mix and match jobs to create your own ultimate team. When you're not following the mainline quest, you can spend your time completing the many different side quests on your journey. Whilst they do net you some decent rewards and much needed XP, they do feel a bit basic as they mostly consist of defeating a certain amount of enemies or collecting some items for some folk. It's basic stuff that do feel a little bit like filler, but then again it does, as I said, net you some decent rewards. If there's any real fault to this game, is that the game plays it a little bit too safe for my liking, but then again when the game is this great, does it really matter? But one thing that is a bit annoying is the constant need for grinding. Yes, this may be a typical RPG quirk for some, but Bravely Default 2 really does double down on the grind, as some of the earlier bosses are incredibly hard to fight unless you do a decent grind. This may not be a fault for hardcore RPG fans, but for newbies this may be a bit of a put off. As for the length now, Bravely Default 2 is another rather lengthy RPG adventure for your Switch, taking you well over 50 hours to reach the game's conclusion. If you want to explore the whole game and do most of the side quests, then you're probably talking a good 60 to 70 hours, which is pretty good. Graphically, this is a bit of an odd one. The previous 2 titles on the 3DS were wonderful looking games with a sort of pastel sort of art style with chibi characters. Now to the move to the Switch we see some absolutely wonderful painted environments that look stunning at times, but the character models can leave a lot to be desired. These cute little chibi characters look very much like toys, and at first I wasn't overly keen. But as I was going through the game, I soon warmed to him, but I can see how some folks could be put off by it. Audio time now, and the Bravely series has been well known for its brilliant soundtrack, and Bravely Default 2 is no different, featuring a grand orchestral soundtrack with many epic and sweeping tunes. As for the voice acting, it certainly features an eclectic mix of regional accents that seem a bit odd at times, but it does have its charms. For those who want a more authentic experience, there is the original Japanese voiceovers, and as per usual, the Japanese voice acting is on point. Conclusion time now, and Bravely Default 2 is yet again another wonderful RPG from Square Enix, set in a lovely world full of quirky characters. The Bravely Default mechanic is still fantastic, and a strategic system after all these years. Whilst this art style is lovely and the music is tremendous, the character models is a bit iffy, and the game does play it a little bit too safe for some. So with that, I'm going to give Bravely Default 2 an 8 out of 10 with the title of Great. As always, thank you for watching my review. I hope you enjoyed it. If you could like and subscribe, that would be great. And until next time, happy gaming. Bye.